All right, welcome to another edition of the Journey to Freedom podcast. And so each week, or as many times as we can, in 2024, when we're currently recording right now, I'm not sure when you're going to get a hold of this. Hopefully, 10 years from now, this is super relevant, and you're able to watch it. But one of the things is we start thinking about our culture, and we start thinking about how do we move forward? How do we take all the lessons from the past? The things that are part of what we do. I was listening to a guy named Myron Golden just the other day, and he was talking about being born in a segregated hospital and how racism has been part of his life, his entire life, because he contracted polio 6 years after the polio vaccine had been invented, and that segregated hospital did not allow him. But he also talks about that was a contributing factor in my life. It wasn't a determining factor. And I had to move beyond that. I had to get past the fact that this has affected me every single day of my life. And so when you think about success leaving clues and you think about what are some places that we can move towards, and that's why we call it a journey, right? A journey in most cases has a destination, but it's a destination that takes a while to get to. This isn't a destination that happens overnight. It's not a destination that most of us may ever see in our lifetimes because it's for our kids and our kids' kids. And today I'm excited because I have Dominic George on today. And when you think about, am I willing to move out of my bubble, to move out of my comfort zone, to move out of what is normal to me? And so, I'll let him tell his whole story, but, I just know he's been on one coast, on the West Coast. Now he's on the East Coast. And he gets to travel a lot. He gets to spend time looking at how culture impacts the world that we live in. So excited that you're here, Dominic. Thank you for being a part of the Journey to Freedom podcast. We're doing 100 men here in 2024. And so you are absolutely the person that we want on this show and the person that we want to talk about some of these 5 pillars that we have. And so maybe we can just start off with you giving us a little bit about your background, your story, where your I guess your origin story, right? We think of all the superheroes, and I look at all of us as superheroes in the things that we do. So go ahead, introduce yourself however you want and tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, and I'm so excited to be here. I love that story of the success clues leading towards your journey. And so maybe I'll tie some of that into my own storyline. So I'm originally from the Bay Area, Oakland, California, was born and raised there. And I lived there for about 30 years, the land of sunshine to some people, but we do have some variation in weather there, just a little bit. And um, I grew up in a family that was really caring, that was all about community, all about connection. And that foundation is what really set me up for success in my own life. And so, as I've navigated my own life, I've gone through many different educational journeys. I've gone off to get my master's degree in New York. I studied my undergraduate degree at University of California, Berkeley, and everywhere in between, just committed to learning. But the foundation piece of that was I wanted to be in community with people because I saw the way that my mother taught others how to learn and connect with people was just through being and helping and being in service to others. And I think that's what led me to my current journey, which is to be a leadership coach for Black men in spaces, moving from mid-level positions into senior leadership. And I'll just say, I think about my own childhood in Oakland, California. And one of the brilliant things that my mother did for me was to set me up with my neighbors. Like, I got to know each person in my community. There was never a point where we were walking down the street where we weren't having a conversation with somebody. And so I sort of took that lesson and applied it to everywhere I went, and that turned into the the brilliant idea of networking and the path that that leads you towards. And so, as I've moved into a journey of leadership coaching, I coach people around like the value of networking and what it takes to really succeed in spaces that maybe you're not familiar with, maybe you haven't been given the success clues to get there. But that's sort of a foundational thing that I
Mhm.
had picked up in my childhood. But more about me, I like I said, born and raised in California. One of the foundational successes for me was being an athlete. So I was a swimmer. I started swimming when I was about 12 years old. Got into the sport later than most of my peers, but I was one of those individuals who were truly committed to success from a very early age. You could talk to my family. I was that one kid who was just like stuck on a thing until I got it perfect, and then I would move to the next thing. Perfection doesn't exist, but I was trying to get as close as possible to everything. And so I was a swimmer for a number of years. It allowed me my first opportunity to travel, and I got to travel across um, or within the U.S. Eventually, I got to travel um, outside of the United States at some point through the sport of swimming, and it really led me to this world of possibilities, which um, I was able to meet friendships, able to um, just really see the world differently. And that eventually led me to understand that I wanted to navigate over to New York City, where I came to New York initially to pursue my graduate degree, and where I studied business and social work. I wanted to blend what does it take to really help people thrive in businesses. And I saw the foundational piece being with people. And so I wanted to couple social work in that framework, and eventually like went off and worked for a number of different companies, consultant, worked with government agencies, education spaces, corporate, and eventually landed on I just wanted to help people lead, and that's where I'm at today.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And just when I think about identity and think of, where we show up in places, and as a leadership coach, I'm sure that is one of the number one topics that you probably start out talking about. Um, you mentioned being a swimmer, and when we look at swimming pools, we don't see a lot of black folks in the pool. I mean, and we swim. I mean, obviously we know how to swim and we swim well.
Yes.
But as far as the sport goes,
Hmm.
how did being a swimmer shaped the part of the identity? I know you had a really good foundation from your parents and a loving community. So I really want to know how, I'm jumping into athletics, and I'll jump back into, being in Berkeley and the West Coast compared to New York.
Yeah.
But what kind of things, like, how did that shape who you became as Dominic George?
Yeah. Um, Such a great question. And I have two different stories inside of being a swimmer. Um, I think I was just really lucky to be in the neighborhood that I was in the area that I was in, to be connected to the type of people that I got connected to at a very early age. And again, I contribute a lot of this to my mother. Um, but I was fortunate enough to be a part of a swim team that was so diverse, and it is it is not the norm at all. Um, I had a opportunity. I'll tell you the backstory of how I learned how to swim, because that led me to this pool. I went to my cousin actually was taking swim lessons. My entire family is competitive. We like to compete against each other, and so my older cousin, she was about a year older than me, was sort of going through the dozens. She learned how to swim. I didn't know how to swim. She challenged me to like go to the pool with her, and we went to this pool that was maybe 3 blocks down the road from where I was at the time. And public pool, went there. She was just like showing off, and I was frustrated. Um, and I didn't know how to swim, so I was just like on the side of the pool. I decided to just like watch. I'm a watcher, I'm a listener. That's also how I learn. And I noticed that this father was teaching his daughter how to swim. And I just listened intently on what the instructions were, how he was doing it, what he instructed her to do. And I watched for a good 30 minutes while my cousins and my brothers were also there at the time, were playing around. And I was just listening, and like I said, I've always been that type of kid who I've committed to something until I got it right. And I've never been afraid to just jump into fear. And that's been a thing that I've just been like since I was younger. And I decided at the age of 12 that I was going to walk over to the deep end, had never jumped into a pool ever. And I said, I'm gonna take the test. I'm gonna take the test to swim 4 laps back and forth, or 4 width of the pool back and forth. And I jumped into the water. The lifeguard said, "Can you swim?" I said, "Yes." No hesitation. I just said, "Yes, I can swim," and had no clue what to do. But I was like holding on to the lessons of this father who was teaching his daughter how to swim.
Uh-huh.
And I jump in the pool. I made sure that I was like next to the rope because I was like, at any point, if anything happens, I'm grabbing onto this rope.
Yeah.
But I jump in and I just make it across. And
Really? Oh gosh.
I was shocked, but I made it across.
Uh-huh.
And something beautiful happened in that moment where the lifeguard, who was a Black woman,
Mhm.
which is also not a common thing in pools, but the pool that I was at was so diverse. Black people,
Mhm.
Latinos who were um, just everybody. It was a mixed crowd. But something beautiful happened where I did that first lap and everyone started cheering me on. And
So cool.
and so I just like kept going back and forth. I was struggling, but I made it through the entire test. And somebody then offered, "Hey, do you want to be a part of a swim team?" And from that point, I ended up being on the swim team. But you asked me a question around that diversity. So that was my first experience in a pool. I was able to see like that support from an early age, had encouragement, people who looked like me in the space. And eventually, like I got a lot better. I was able to compete at a national level at some point in my tenure of swimming. But along that journey, I became, as I got better and better, I became the one of few in every single spaces. And um, it was challenging. Like it was
Mhm.
hard to walk into spaces where you didn't see yourself reflected in
Mhm.
other people's experiences. And it's no different than how I support people in navigating leadership. But what I hold on to was that early moment of support and community that I think people just need that in spaces where they're one of few and oftentimes one of only.
That is so cool because you think of, all the opportunities where it could have gone bad, where it could have been, what are you doing in this pool? Why do you even think you should try to be here? You have no business here. And you were
Mhm,
able to get the exact opposite. I think of, I was a pretty good swimmer growing up, and I was an athlete. And, our stories kind of mimic each other. Where I was, in track, and I was able to do stuff. But I wasn't on a, I think one swim team in my life, and it was during track season, so I did track. But I was able, because I got my degree in physical education. I got my WSI, and then I immediately became a beach guard. So I'm in Southern California, on the beach and saving people all the time. And then I did
mhm,
I worked at a few pools. I worked at a water park for a while. Kind of the same experience as like I'm this only guy that's here,
yeah,
but it translated to my kids, right? So my daughter was in gymnastics, but she wanted to learn how to dive.
mhm,
And I had been a gymnast in high school, and so we were really, but we were over at Mount Sac, and we're, she's getting in a bucket every day after she gets out of the pool, trash can, and we're down at Mission Viejo, and she literally came to me saying the same thing, Dad, there is not anybody here. She's
mhm,
10 years old and realized that looks like me. I'm like, you're going to do fine, honey. You're going to enjoy it. And she went on to switch over to track. But just to be able, she's like, is there anybody? And I'm like,
mhm,
we're in Mission Viejo. There's not even people who live in Mission Viejo. So what are we going to do?
yeah,
But the experience is huge for her. And she brings me back to that all the time. So I
mm,
can think of, whether it was me encouraging you, and, when I remember she got up on the platform for the first time, just to jump off of it, and people were doing the same thing, clapping for
mm,
her, encouraging her to do it. So that's huge that happened with you.
mm.
I love that you were able to do that. Were there any other pivotal moments? I mean, I know you're in Northern California, and you're starting to get to travel, and sounds like you were a good enough swimmer to be able to, maybe go to some junior nationals and some national stuff. And then, did you swim in college as well? Were you on the swim
I
team
did,
in college? Okay.
yeah, I did swim in college as well.
Okay, good. So then you got to travel all over as far as seeing that, and then, like you said, Europe or overseas. I got to do
Mhm,
track the same way and spend time in Europe, and what an experience to be able to gain these experiences. How do those different experiences? Because now you say, okay, yeah, it's lonely there, but I'm still gaining all of this experience by being able to do the sport and be in different areas. How do you think that shaped who you were as far as your belief in yourself and your ability to do anything?
Yeah. I still go back to like that early encouragement of those early cheers, because there's moments where you could feel lonely in a space if you're not represented in the spaces in which you enter into. That's a perspective. You could also see the abundance of people around you as well. But the how did that influence me? I feel like I've navigated. Actually, I'm sorry. Can you say the question one more time so I make sure that I'm
Yeah,
answering?
no, I'm just asking how that those experiences, being able to be in the different place, shaped your ability
Mm,
to be
got
able
it.
to, hey, have your own business that says I'm a
Yeah.
leadership coach now and move forward in life.
Got it. Thank you for the clarity. So, yeah, I still think of that early validation, that early praise,
Mhm.
because there are so many different moments where you're going to go through hurdles and you're going to be on a high note of celebration. And there's going to be moments in your career or however you're navigating life that there may be some pitfalls along the way.
Mhm.
But I personally hold on to those early moments of praise and early moments of cheering because it's in community that I think we often get to thrive. So for me, the way that I do that is I consistently surround myself with people who I think are just smarter than me as often as possible, because I know my gifts and I know my talents and what I'm able to offer the world. And the spaces where I'm not able to do that, I'm surrounding myself with the best groups of people. But for me, it's all about exposure. You may be one of few, you may be one of many in a space, but the more exposure you have to different opportunities, the more your mindset shifts, the more you can see what's available in front of you. I think of that first time that I was able to travel or internationally, and it just opened up a whole world of possibilities. I remember there was a moment where um, someone gave me a choice, and it was the best advice that I ever got. But they said you could either buy a pair of shoes or you could buy a plane ticket, and I said, "Huh, I'm gonna go without the shoes for today," and just save that money that I earned over time, and I bought my first plane ticket. And getting off the plane to see the world in front of me, I was like, "There's a whole different possibility." And it was that it was just another piece of exposure that allowed me to see that I could do anything that I set my mind to. It's
Yes.
just a matter of like,
Mhm.
can you actually see it?
Yeah. Oh man, I love that. Do you want to buy a pair, you pair of shoes? You already have shoes in your closet, right? You think of the consumers of the of our communities and their culture that aren't getting the exposure,
Mm,
that are not able to travel because that maybe that's never posed to them that they even have that option or that
yeah.
choice is there. And I love that you took advantage of, hey, let me learn more about the world. When I think about associations, and you brought up associations and people that you're around, how important were the people that were in your life, or and not even just how important they are? How did you choose the associations that you would even have somebody who would say that to you, buy a pair of shoes or buy a a plane ticket?
Yeah.
How do you find those? If we're talking to people that are here, they're looking for it, and then how has it shaped you as far as you finding the right associations?
I think it was in the inquiry for me. I'm a naturally inquisitive person. I was that child who was asking my mother, why this, why that,
Hmm.
to the point where she was like, stop asking me why. But I would just like always ask, why is this the way that it is? Because I wanted to figure out the world in front of me. And I believe that the way that I was able to get connected to so many different people is because one, was just open to the possibility. You have to be open to the idea of meeting people, open to the idea, even on this podcast. We were in collaboration, um, had a conversation, and then we're on this podcast having a conversation, right? It was that early openness to be open to whatever the possibility is. And I think it's just like being curious.
Hmm.
And from there, once you're curious, you're able to ask the right questions. for me, I was on this quest to learn and on this quest to get better, because I knew what my childhood journey was, which I grew up in a family that didn't have a lot of money. We were definitely economically, um, just not well off, and there was no other way other than to go upward.
Mhm.
And my mother really taught me, like, how do you utilize the resources around you to make the best of your scenario? And it was in that eye-opening reality of watching her navigate her resources, navigating community, navigating support, that I was able to go off into these spaces where I didn't always have the answer, but I knew that I had the right questions to ask, and somebody would lead me to the right person that I needed to be connected to, and that opened up the door to the resources.
Wow, that's good. Let's let's pivot right now to, we talked a lot about identity here, and I want to kind of talk about trust. Um, because I think of the move, and I've been to Northern California many, many times, and I've been to New York many, many, many times. They are totally two different cultures,
Very.
the spaces, two different everything, and your ability to trust. If we want to show up with trust, and we can at some point talk about different pillars of trust. But in order to move forward, you have to be able to trust, and I know there has to be fears that are inside that. What are some of the things that you had to overcome, or things that you had to rethink in order to have the courage to move to a brand new environment that doesn't have family, that doesn't, yes, there's this opportunity, but so many of us get stuck between opportunity and where we're at now because we don't know how to bridge that gap because of fear. How
Mhm.
did you bridge that gap?
Yeah, that's such a brilliant question. I immediately think of mindset shifts, and
Hmm.
um, I'll speak from the I first, and then how I experience other people often. For me, it's about someone gave me some advice that I have never let go either. So there was the advice about the shoes or the travel that has stuck with me forever, because it's helped me manage money in a different way. Um, the other advice I got was just like a perspective shift. Was someone said to me, "You've never failed to this moment. Why would you anticipate that you're going to fail tomorrow?" And um, when I really sat back and thought about it, because I was in this moment of like, where do I go next? I'm trying to think of, do I take the right turn or the left turn? I have this opportunity in front of me. Do I take it or not? And inside of that was fear. I was thinking, if I go this way, I might fail. If I go this way, I might succeed. And I was trying to navigate the what ifs. And this person stopped me and said, "You haven't failed yet. Like, why would you assume that you are?" And so for me, really sitting down and being grounded in who you are, because we all navigate triumphs and tribulations, right? But when you really think about it, none of us has ever really failed. We may have hit a place of disappointment or our lowest, but we've never really failed. And I believe when you are able to step forward and you're able to take another breath and you're able to have another conversation, or whatever the progression forward is for you, whether it's big or small, you are succeeding by moving forward. And so I believe it's just like taking that first step. That's how you build trust. And as I continue to work with other people, I offer those lessons, right? Take a moment to sit back and think about where you are now. If you think about 5 years ago, were you in the same situation, or were there elements of your experience that allowed you to grow to be where you are? And a lot of people just don't like have the privilege and the time to sit back and reflect. But when you do, you actually see how successful you truly are, and there's nothing that is impossible.
Oh gosh, I love that. I just, you brought me back to, as you were talking. I have, two grandkids. I have 13 grandkids, but I was two in
Mhm.
particular with that. We're at a swim meet. They were swimming. They didn't come in first. They were mad. They were talking about how they lost, and our conversation in the car on the way home was, you didn't lose. You only lose if you or fail. They said, I'm a failure. Like, no, you only lose or fail if you don't learn anything.
Mhm.
If you do that, then that's when you actually have lost. But I love what you just said there, because you said, we really don't fail. We just fail to gain whatever the perspective was.
Yeah.
That I was loving there. And you just thinking about that whole mindset. I just finished a book called "There Is No Tiger," and
Mhm.
it's about overcoming, fears, overcoming overthinking, and controlling anxiety. And
Mhm.
I just saw that in exactly what you were saying, that what we put in our mind, that we overthink, that we put together, that we've why would I assume, I'm going to use that too as I'm talking and speaking,
Yeah.
why would I assume I'm going to fail? I love that. If we could all walk into every situation, no, instead of thinking about all the ways I can fail, right? Because when you're overthinking, you're finding every reel in your mind that allows you to figure out why it's not going to work. But
Mhm.
switch that mind shift, uh, and say, wait a minute, why would I assume that in the first place? I
Yeah.
love that. That you did
Yep.
say, you talked about mindset shifts. Can you kind of just talk about what that is, and how we can integrate it in our lives, or find ways that we can shift our mindset?
Yeah, I think at the simplest form, when I think about mindset shifts, is you have a perspective that you are comfortable with,
Mhm.
and then there's a space in which you don't know really what you don't know, right? And until you're exposed to it. And um, when you think about what you do know,
Mhm.
you could stay in that comfort zone, and you could lead from that space. You could operate in that space, and you could be very comfortable with who you are in this moment, which is great. And there are opportunities where if you want to shift and you want to do something different, what you've already done is not going to get you to that new place. And so it's about shifting your mind to what's available in front of you and what's possible. And for some people, that is fear. That is getting stuck in, if I let go of what I know, can I access the unknown to bring me further? And I believe that the answer is always yes, but it's about shifting your mind to say, there's something greater for me on the other side. I just have to let go of what I'm used to and what I'm comfortable with in order to get to a new level. And so that's how I interpret it, mindset shifts in the basics form, but there's many different layers that go into it.
Give me an example of letting go. Like, I know you said, hey, in order to shift your mind to something else, you have to be willing to let go of something else. How does
Mhm.
one do that? What is an example of a way that, either from your personal life or people you coach, how do you help people, or you yourself, let go
Yeah.
of a existing mind shift? Yeah.
I'll make a general term or general example so people could relate to it. I think about relationships. There are individuals in the world, we're all in relationships, whether we want to be or not, with somebody. And um, there are those individuals in the world who just like can't figure out relationships, whether that be a friendship or a romantic relationship. There are individuals who try. Maybe you go out on that date, or you approach somebody and it just doesn't work, and you try it with a new person, and you try the same tactic, and you do it. You approach them in the same way, and maybe you get a little bit further in the conversation, but it just doesn't get you any further. And then there's those people who like actually go on the dates and it's successful. They go on date one, two, three, they have fun. By date four, the person's like, this is not going to work. And you have those individuals who have those repeated experiences. You could take on the mindset that there's something wrong with me that is why this is not working. So that's one perspective. The other mindset is you could let go of the way that you think that this has to look in order to relate to people, and you could try on something new. So maybe it's not you pursuing that person, it's like you allowing the other person to lead in the conversation. Or you could let go of the idea that whatever your upbringing is around relationships, like you don't have to be the person who's like creating the experience. You could actually be supported in the process. It's about letting go of what your assumed beliefs are, so you can be open to the possibility, because that could get you to date number five, or that could get you to a year of marriage, that could get you to a new relationship. That's an example of what I think of in terms of like a relationship. When I'm coaching people and I'm thinking about career, Um, Often people think that I've experienced a lot of people who like come in contact with me as I'm going through the initial phase of like helping people develop goals and strategizing and then executing on those goals. And what I often encounter is individuals think that they have to do it by themselves. Like
Hmm.
they have to be the greatest person in the room. They have to be the person put in the work, the hard work, in order to like move further in whatever their ambitions are. And you could take a step back in that mindset shift and say, who are the resources and the stakeholders around me? Who are the sponsors that are in my reach that I either have talked to that I didn't know was a sponsor, or I've been in resistance to because whatever reason? There's an opportunity to realize like you don't have to do it alone, and you could actually be in relationship with people, and you could actually move further together than doing it by yourself. So those are two different types of ways that people can let go of something in order to gain a new mindset.
Yeah, this, I think of being willing to let others help. I think it's a weakness of mine that I have, that I, like you said, that I see in many people, is this belief system that we have to do it by ourselves. You and I have been part of teams, and we know that we're better together than we are individually.
Yeah.
What do you think it is that's within us that makes us believe we have to do it ourselves?
I think part of that earlier conversation around trust, right, is
Mhm.
vulnerability.
Okay,
And
I like that.
um, when you're unable to really step into vulnerability, and part of that is sometimes saying, hey, I'm actually wrong, or I don't know everything that you think I know, or I don't have all the answers, right? It's about being vulnerable enough, and you could be right as well, but being vulnerable enough to be open with people so that they can actually help you and they can support you. I think at the foundation, we all want to succeed and we actually all want to succeed together. I think society has created this false narrative that we're all in competition and there's an abundance of opportunities in this world. And that is something that I've learned as I've traveled across the world, that people are consistently willing to help you if you just open your eyes to the possibility.
Yeah, this belief that there's a lack of resources, that there's
Yeah.
not, it's, every time, even when you study economics, and it says that there's a finite amount of resources, and then once that's depleted, then there's nothing left.
Yeah.
And yet, as the human existence continues, every time we run out of one resource, we figure out a way to have another one come up. If it's whale
Mhm.
blubber that creates fuel in the the 1700s, and now we have oil and solar, right? I mean,
Mhm.
and how about with people power as well, and things that we want to do, and there's this ultimate, if you can, I guess, have that mindset that it's not based on a lack, and if I don't get mine, then nobody else is going to be able to get
Yeah.
that. You mentioned earlier, and I didn't want, I wrote it down because I don't want it to go by. You talked about your mindset changed about money.
Mhm.
And as we move into just talking about finances a little bit, and how you think about finances, because I think that's a block that we find ourselves in so many times, is I can't
Mhm.
because I don't have.
Yeah.
And I didn't grow up having, I didn't, I don't really understand this whole concept of money. But I think, back to your thing on mindset, what is that mindset that you said that changed in your life that allows you to interact with money differently than maybe some of the other folks that you interact with on a daily basis?
Yeah. So I would say that something that occurred for me in my childhood, which I'm still working through, like how to truly release, is this idea of growing up in poverty. And my family did the best that they could to navigate the world that they had in front of them, and we did the best that we could do at that moment. And I'm so grateful for those learned lessons because it's truly set me up for success. But what I have worked to let go of is this idea that I needed to be a permanent saver, that I need to like hold on to my money so tight that I couldn't release it. And so I was always working hard to save, working hard to hold on to everything that I had. And what I learned over time is in being in these other networks and connecting with other people who are a little bit more affluent than I was at the moment, and just entering into different circles. I learned that in order to truly have abundance, like you have to release in order to receive. And that has turned, for me, that's turned into understanding what does investment mean? What are the different diversifications of investment? How can you both support someone else while
Mhm.
also benefit at the same
Yeah,
time?
yeah.
And there's just so many different ways that I've learned how to invest my money in a way that um, adds values to the things that I want to do and want to support, but also helps me thrive at the same time. And I think both of those things don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Mhm.
And in my younger age, I thought, um, again, you kind of have to work hard in order to preserve and to sustain. But my later career and tenure, I've learned that you could actually thrive by giving.
Yeah, well, that whole law of reciprocity and the whole law of sowing and reaping
Mhm.
is so huge. But that poverty mindset, I mean, I think that is um, not easy to get over. It's
Yeah.
not like, okay, I just wake up one day and I have this different concept about how
Mhm.
money works, or this different concept of how it will work in my life. And we get back to that trust, right? I have
Yeah.
to trust that my money can work for me
Mhm.
instead of me working for it and trading those hours for dollars. Because when you trade those hours for dollars, it's hard to get rid of it because, hey, I worked for this. And
Mhm.
now that I've worked for it, if I give it to somebody else, then it's not mine anymore. And
I
somehow I have to have it.
Yeah. There's an example of, I was in undergraduate school, I was surviving, I was figuring out life, and, was just fortunate enough to be a part of many different organizations, learn many different things, but part of the undergraduate process was me taking on loans. I was able to, like, pursue a lot of scholarships, and that helped me out a lot, but in undergraduate, I wasn't familiar with debt to expenses and
Mhm.
went down a rabbit hole there. But what I ended up doing was my first like entrepreneur venture is I discovered Airbnb at a time. And I was in a position where I had a place that I was able to rent out at the time. And there was a moment where I was like holding on. Do I let people in my space? That's my sanctuary. I value home. I value like the energy that I'm surrounded by. And there was a moment where I just like couldn't decide if I wanted to invite people into my home that I wasn't familiar with. And I decided to like release that and shift my mindset to something greater is on the other side of this. Although I'm working towards releasing this debt, there's something greater on the other end. And so I went on this whole journey of the shared economy, um, and started a side hustle with Airbnb and renting out my place. And that turned into, I was fortunate enough to be in a space where it was like an international hub. And so right next to San Francisco, I was in West Oakland at the time. And um, it turned into like so many different people around the world wanted to stay at my house, and I got to connect with these people from around the world that turned into friendships that then blossom into now I get to travel across the world and actually connect with these people. I've stayed with them because they've stayed with me, and it just speaks to the like the reciprocity of when you give, you actually receive in different ways, and um, that's what stood out to me as you were talking.
I know that is so good. So
And
you
the other
develop,
side of that was
yeah,
I
yeah.
actually like paid off my debt at the same time.
Oh, that's so cool. So you develop a risk tolerance, an ability to risk without believing it's going to all fall apart and fail. What
Yeah,
are some of the things that you did, or thought processes that you had to have? Because it's easy to say, I just changed my mindset, right? Because you're
yeah.
looking at hindsight and say, oh, yeah, I just changed my mindset,
Mhm.
because you did. Uh, but maybe looking back, what are some of those risk tolerance things that you did that allowed you to say, you know what? I don't want to take a risk of somebody living in my house
Mm.
to get to, oh, there's a whole bunch of international people living in my house and I'm learning and growing and being exposed and all those things that end up being wonderful. Maybe a couple of things that could help folks out with that.
Yeah. I'll talk on a smaller scale, or at least it felt like a smaller scale stakes to me at the moment.
Hmm.
I remember I had chose just not to buy a car for the longest time, and I'm still all about. It was one of the reasons I moved to New York City because I didn't want to commute and drive. I wanted public transportation, which I love, and but when I was in California, you needed a car. But I was on that curve of just like, I'm still not going to do it. I'm gonna figure out like how to commute without a car. So I figured out conveniences for myself. But there was a moment where I decided, okay, I actually need a car because of the career trajectory that I was on. I needed to be in different places at a reasonable time, and a car was the best solution at that time. And so I did all my research. I decided on the car that I wanted. I figured out the lot and the dealer that I wanted to pursue. It was my first time entering into a space of negotiation,
Hmm.
and I decided that I was willing to risk it all. I had already decided I wanted this car. I was like, I'm going to go get this car no matter what. But I had decided if it wasn't in my price, that I was actually just going to walk away. Um, and I go on this lot and I'm like negotiating. It's the first time doing this for myself. I was a young kid. And the dealer's like trying to go back and forth about it has to be this price. And I'm like, no, I know the facts. Like it needs to be this price. And I'm going back and forth. And there was a point where I realized he wasn't gonna like budge on the price that I actually wanted. And so it was in that moment that I said, this is the moment where I'm willing to just let it all go. And so I'm like walking off the lot. I'm like terrified because I'm like, I'm losing this car and I wanted this car. And I get to the end of the lot, literally as I'm turning the corner, the guy yells and he's like, come back, I'll give it to you for that deal. And it was in that moment that I realized like you just have to stick to your gut. And there are things that if you're just truly willing to let go of, that you can get what you actually need on the other end. That's a small example. A larger or I'll say another smaller, even smaller scale decision that I have picked up over time is just even in my own work, my work trajectory and leadership journey. I realized that I have a huge skill set and I've honed in on the things that I do best. And I've become an expert in certain areas that I know that I could offer a company, I could offer a business, I could offer individuals on how to thrive in certain areas. And um, I've just learned how to rally my resources, hold on to the things that I need to do to survive. So I have a cushion.
Hmm.
Um, and then there's areas of my finances and there's areas of decision making that I'm willing to just say, I'll let this go if I can't get to where I need to be. And it's just a matter of saying, I'm open to the no. I'm open to the possibility that somebody's not willing to meet my standards. Because again, I think on the other end of that no is your increased possibility.
I really enjoy the fact that you feel like, hey, I got a skill set. I'm in my purpose, and to kind of journey into our faith and our spirituality. Like one of the prayers that I say every single morning is, "Dear Lord, give me the wisdom to do what you put me on this earth to do." And give me the ability to, as why I serve others, please you and serve others. That's one of my prayers every single day because I feel like I'm now in my giftedness, and that
Mhm.
for you in your spiritual journey, in your faith journey, what are some of those ideas or those principles that you hold to yourself that allow you to go, hey, I'm in the right spot at the right time, doing the right things through my journey? What are some of those? Kind of tell us about that.
Yeah, I talked earlier about my mix of social work and business, and I had gone through a journey of prioritizing business first and business practices, which are often focused on bottom line and then people second. Um, or at least the companies that I initially worked for or was signing up to work for. And what I realized was that I actually wanted to put people first in that equation. I wanted to prioritize people growth. I wanted to prioritize relationships. And I believe in the investment in people is what's going to actually get you the sustainable bottom line that you're looking for. And so I was looking to like flip that equation, and social work and business. I found a program that aligned both of those things and it made sense to me. And I've since ran with it. Um, and so every opportunity that I'm up against, that I have an opportunity to either invest my talent in or invest my business in, um, I often reflect on, is this putting people first in the equation? And I'm in a space where I actually get to do that every day. I'm working with people that I love. I'm working with organizations that I get to impact. I'm working with individuals who have like minded mindsets. And so, one of the things that grounds me is every day I wake up in gratitude. The
Mhm.
first thing that I do is I say thank you for another opportunity to breathe, because it's in the ability to just like get up and move forward and take that one step. Um, as another opportunity towards your goals and your dreams, that we get to truly thrive and be happy. And so I wake up in gratitude as the first step, um, to my own spiritual practice. And the other piece of social work that I've learned over time is you truly do have to be centered with yourself to understand who you are. Part of my transition from California to New York is, like you name it, it's two different cultures, it's completely different environments, different expectations. And I found myself like in this in between space of, I want to be on this fast track that everybody else is on in New York, but I also want the ease and the comfort of the relaxed lifestyle of California. And I found myself like being at odds between the two. And there was a moment where I realized I was like moving to everybody else's pace in life. And I took a step back and I said, actually, let me just center on what I want and what I need in this moment. Because when you think about your own gifts and your own desires and what you have to offer to the world, because I believe that your gifts are for other people. So when you can like truly center on that, then you start to like pivot towards the things that you actually love, and you start to move towards happiness, and you start to be in a position where you don't have to like dread the day. And it so for me, that spiritual practice is just being centered. Um, my personal preference is to be centered with God, who I believe in, and it's just a matter of like just sitting with yourself, both in that gratitude, but also in relationship to whoever your spiritual leader is.
I can tell you're a very introspective person. You do a lot of thinking. You do a lot of um, searching for things before you make decisions.
Yes, I
Who,
definitely.
yeah, who do you read? Who do you like? Like when you're putting things in your mind to help you make decisions, or just the types of books that you read, the information that you allow to go into your mind and keep out some of the others. What are some of those practices in, like I said, your favorite authors, or the you know I can tell you got some, so yeah, I'll just let you go ahead and run with it.
Yeah, the first person that I think about is Angela Davis. I
Okay.
think she's such a like a phenomenal individual. I was thinking about, I just read Freedom is a Consistent Struggle, and I think about her, just her lifespan. I've been fortunate just to hear her speak in person and see the consistency in her journey over time. And what I love about her is that she centers people first, and then she brings all of her lived experience and knowledge into that conversation. But that's a person that I'm have been currently reading. One of the things that I love to read is memoirs, and I just love to hear people's stories and how they have overcome whatever they were up against, in order to get to a place of thriving. And so I've learned from people like Cicely Tyson's book, just watching her journey on screen and then hearing her own memoir of her experience. I think about the who else am I reading? There's a older novel that I sort of go back to time over time again. Think and Grow Rich, which is Napoleon Hill, I believe,
Yep.
who wrote that book, and it's it's a fascinating. It's a quick read if you want it to be quick, but to really sit with that information and think about like how are you actually internalizing the things that you have and the perspective that you have on whether it be money or whatever the thing that you're reflecting on is.
Mhm.
I think it's an interesting read. Toni Morrison. I love all of her novels. I think the central piece is for all of the books that I pick up and I try to learn from other people's experience because I want to take the tools that they've lived through in order to apply to my own life.
Any leadership people that you, whether they speak about leadership or you follow their example, that you've dug into a little bit?
Yeah, the person I read a number of different leadership books, but I would say that the Leading Change by John Cotter
Hmm.
is a book that I have loved. Kim Scott has wrote a book about radical candor. I read that earlier in my career that I think just
I haven't read that one.
really really supported just like how I'm navigating spaces.
Okay.
Um, because I've led so many different teams, I think this is always applicable to whatever space that I've been in. But the five dysfunctions of a team, Patrick, I'm going to butcher his last name. I can't even say it. It starts with a L for sure. But
All right, Patrick Gale. All right, what was it again?
um,
Five what?
the the five dysfunctions of a team.
Okay.
And what I love about that book is it just really speaks to different personalities that you will encounter over the span of your leadership and how to really shift people to get centered on a shared goal and a shared direction. Um, those are a couple of books that come to mind, but I feel like I'm always learning from different leaders, whether it be podcasts or conferences or um, other CEOs in different spaces and learning from their experiences. But yeah, those are things
Gotcha.
that
All
come to
right.
mind.
It came up with Patrick Linconi, or
Yes, that's what it is.
Lencioni.
Right.
Um, yeah, I've been really been, John Maxwell has been a big,
Yes, John Maxwell as well.
leadership person for me right now. And then reading some TD Jake stuff and some, even Tyler Perry. I just watched the
Mm.
Netflix story on Tyler Perry's life, and
Which was incredible to me, actually.
oh my gosh,
Yeah.
what an amazing man. Uh, you know, as we move forward, I want you to just give some time to talk about whatever you want to, but just how do you stay healthy? What is it that African American men, that the average lifespan is 72 years old?
Mhm.
What are you doing in your life to make sure that you stay healthy?
I like to reflect on the study often. Um, it's that study where I'm going to forget the title, but it's where people are on their deathbed and they're speaking through their live regrets
Hmm.
and goes through the top seven, I believe. And so I'm often reflecting on an annual basis or biannual basis on what are those components that people just live to regret, and often that is like working too much and not having enough time to do the things that you love. And so for
Hmm.
me, it's about balancing um, exercise and health. I've definitely been on this health journey of I'm a vegetarian, so I don't eat meat,
Okay.
and I think that mind shift of I've been a vegetarian for about 5 years now, and just having the last like 30 plus years be I just grew up eating meat. And so it was a whole shift to like think
Yeah.
about like how do you actually take care of your body in a different way? How do you read ingredients to make sure that what you're ingesting is not what you were familiar with. And that's been a whole like learning journey for the last 5 years to reinvent my whole diet, which I love. It's been a fun discovery. So that's one way, just focusing on what I'm actually digesting, but actually making time to exercise, and be in community with people who also exercise. I think it's easy to work nonstop in this world, and it's easy to go back to back meetings, especially as you navigate your leadership journey. It's easy to get consumed with work and improving things, but you can't be better for other people if you're not prioritizing yourself first. So I try to balance both of those things: health and eating, and exercising. And then the last thing I would say is making time just to like laugh,
Hmm.
being with friends and having conversation. I don't think we laugh enough,
Yeah,
and it's the thing that
absolutely.
for me keeps me happy. So I try to do it as often as possible.
Oh, that's great. I feel like today getting bombarded. I was just in the car with young lady that kind of challenged me. She said, "Have you, we were talking about fish, and I was saying I was allergic to it." And she says, "Well,
Mhm.
have you ever tried being a vegetarian or vegan?" I'm like, "No." She says, "You like me, right?" "Yeah." "Well, why don't you try it? I'll take you to a place." And then now I get on with you, and you're like, "Okay." So, but yeah, I mean, it is what we put in, right? You're only as good as the substance that we put into our body. I've been doing a
Mhm.
lot of intermittent fasting lately, and I don't eat before 1 o'clock in the afternoon now, and I'm loving that journey because I have that energy, right? It's energy you don't realize you have, and we have such bad habits of the things that we put into our body.
Yeah.
I mean, we were at we got about 5 minutes left in our conversation today, and I really want our conversation always goes in a different direction than people had assumed that it would go. And I
Mhm.
know there might have been some things when before we talked that you said, "Hey, I really want to talk about this," or "I really want to explore this." I want to give you that opportunity right now. Is this kind of what are some of the things that you really wanted to impart as people watch this or people want to grow? I know that I want to make sure we get your information in the comments. If people are looking for some leadership help, because I think that it's definitely something you could help somebody out with. But what are as closing thoughts or as thoughts of things that you want to make sure that we talk about?
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, even weaving out of childhood journey to travel to books, and it's just been a fun conversation. The thing that I often center all of my clients around, all of my friends, anybody who I come in contact with, is that it truly is about your mindset. And if you could shift your mindset from what you think is impossible to what's possible, you can truly achieve whatever you want to. It's just a matter of thinking about it first, believing in it enough that you could actually visualize it and see in it. And then when you open up your mind and your eyes to the possibilities, the world will literally transform to meet you where you need to be in order to open that door or that window to get you where you want to go. And so I would impart that if you're in a space where you're thinking whatever you're up against, there's no solution out, that I would offer that you shift your mindset to understanding that what you think is impossible now is actually possible. It's just a matter of redirecting.
Wow, that's so good. So many interesting things, and I know we talked about a lot today. Whether it was exposure or mindset shifts or not being able to fail. I would love to come back at some point, you and I, and just really maybe just do a mind shift show. Where
Mm,
we talk about the basics of what it takes to shift your mind and what are some of the practices and the habits and the things that you really have to do internally.
mm,
These are deciding factors, not contributing factors where life contributed to where you're at, but
mhm.
internally making those decisions that make a huge difference. And so hopefully you'll be willing to do that. We'll see if we get a call. We could just
Definitely.
because I think it's so helpful. But I don't think we got deep enough, right?
Yeah.
For to actually help somebody shift their mind to making it better. But that's what the show is all about. The show is about. So if you're finding that you're needing things, like I said, I'll have Dominic's contact information if you're willing to talk to a few people who might just reach out. And I'm not saying that we should do any of these things for free either. I mean, if there are some things in your life that you need help with, get some help. I say at all my shows that you can do the things that we're talking about doing, and you can change your trajectory in life. You deserve to be able to do it. When we think about our past and the things that are happening, we are in one of the greatest opportunities in the history of the world right now to be able to take the bull by the horns, or whatever you would say, and move forward. But I would also say, don't try to do this alone. Do not try to do this alone. Find some people that you can be around. We talked about associations today. We talked about books that people read. Those are the associations and the communities that we need to develop. And so, Dominic, again, thank you for being part of the show. Thank you for coming on. Like I said, I hope you'll come back next time, and we can enjoy another episode of the journey to freedom as we try to move forward in our lives. So, thank you very much.
I'm definitely looking forward to it. And I would say that anybody who wants to connect with me, the easiest way to get in contact with me is through LinkedIn. And my handle is Dominic C. George. You could connect with me there on LinkedIn, send me a request, and I'll respond to you there. Or the other option is to email me directly, which is Dominic@visionleadershipforlife.com. And those are two avenues to get in contact with me.
You said Vision Leadership for Life?
Correct.
.com. Vision Leadership for Life. Make sure you do it. Thanks again, Dominic. We appreciate you being on the show today.
Appreciate it. Thank you.